to the Feminine Millionaire Show. I'm your host, Polly Alexander, and I'm a success coach, healer, creative, and future millionaire. If creating money and success in a spiritual and feminine way is your goal, this show is for you. Understand how to overcome your past, bring your soul's greatest gifts to the world, and up-level your income, impact, joy, and happiness. Join me each week to be inspired and uplifted as you learn the business, mindset, energetic, and spiritual shifts you can make to create your own wildly abundant life and business. Let's all rise together. Welcome to today's show. I'm super excited today to have my very dear friend, coach, healer, speaker, and author, Amy Hackett Jones on the show. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much, Polly. I'm so excited.
So before I dive into how Amy and I met, I'm just going to tell you this is going to be a great episode. So Amy is known as the Peace Whisperer for her ability to imbue everything she does with a grounded sense of inner peace. She has a zestful wanderlust, a penchant for triathlons, and a deep sense of humility and down-to-earthness that enables any walk of life to feel comfortably at home in her presence. Her wisdom, trustworthiness, knack for deeply and attentively listening, and the warmth she lends in her bright eyes and sincere smile are what makes her a pillar of strength for those around her. She takes her clients on a journey of inner peace, personal power, and an inspired purpose as they discover the richness of being brilliant through both happiness and high performance. Now, before I dive in, I just want to share how Amy and I met. I think we've been friends for about 5 or 6 years now.
Yep, something like that. 2015 it was.
Aha, okay, 6 years. And we actually met in Italy on a business coaching event. We were on the same business coaching program. And we developed our friendship over the years. And then both went on to train as theta healers. And somehow our journey seems to keep weaving together.
Mm-hmm.
I like to call Amy my wise owl. She has such a depth of character and such deep wisdom and a real presence that's very rare in this world. And when I think of abundance, I think of Amy and her huge appetite for life, her huge sense of adventure. You know, one of the things I'm passionate about is women becoming wildly abundant. And that means in all senses of the word. And Amy is a woman that really squeezes every drop out of life, that really sees the world as her playground. And she has had a very interesting journey so far, including things like a serious skiing accident, almost becoming a spy, traveling the world interviewing heads of state, coaching a president, spending almost a decade living in Panama, and working alongside a shaman. And that's all before we get to her life now. And she really brings a deep inner wisdom and a radiance to my life. So thank you, Amy. It's a joy to be starting off by interviewing you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I think if you would like to start by sharing what brought you to the work that you do now.
Yes, in a nutshell, or as much of a nutshell as I can make it, I was on a project in Botswana, and I remember I was staying in a hotel, and from one day to the next, I had to change rooms. And the room I got moved to ended up having a copy of The Secret, which had just come out, on the bedside table. You know where usually hotels have a copy of the Bible? Mm-hmm. Well, there was a copy of The Secret. And I'd sort of been longing at that point for something deeper. I'd been yearning for something more, and I didn't quite know what, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And so here we go. Here's the book. And then so I devour the book, and then I devour the movie. And then once that project had finished, I was sent to Panama. And when I was in Panama, I ended up meeting a shaman And we ended up working together, building a business together, coaching the president together. And that's really how it evolved. So I learned how to coach on the job from a shaman. And my own coaching practice has evolved since then. As you mentioned, I've learned how to do theta healing. I've learned how to do all sorts of other practices, coupled with everything that I learned on the job in Panama.
I remember that book, The Secret.
It's a while ago now.
It is. But I think it's one of the most famous books, in the field of personal development, even to this day.
Yeah.
What would you say was kind of the big takeaway for you when you read that book at the time?
At the time, it was the power of intentional manifesting. I think a lot of the book has since been criticized for not talking so much about the action that you actually have to take, the aligned action. But what I learned from that mostly was, the power of intentional manifesting. And so because I was so hungry for more, I was hungry for something deeper. It's like it almost opened a window into a whole new realm of opportunities for me. And when I arrived in Panama, I didn't, I was just finding my way in a new country, as I had often done. But I kept finding opportunities to meditate, different types of lessons, different types of courses, different types of all sorts. And so I went to a few, and then I just got more and more curious. And then I thought to myself, I would love to be able to do this as a job. I saw somebody leading a meditation session. I thought, gosh, how amazing would this be? And so I started setting intentions for myself. And I started practicing with things like they mentioned in the book, of manifesting a car parking space where you want to manifest a car parking space. So I started doing things like that and just practicing over and over again. And then I remember being going to an event in Panama, which was organized by this lady who happened to be the wife of the shaman. And it was called Phenomenal Women in Business in Panama. So I went along, and I ended up sitting next to a Swedish woman who used to be the former Olympic swimmer. And we ended up talking about triathlon training, and I had just started triathlon training. So she offered to come and coach me swimming. And as we were having that conversation between the two of us, there was a gentleman in the room who was handing out leaflets, and he was the husband of the woman who was leading the event. And he leant over and said, well, I can help you too. And I sort of looked him up and down and thought, this guy in his 70s, who's clearly not that in shape, etc. But then he pointed to his head and he said, not from here. And then he pointed to his heart and said, from here. And he had such a twinkle in his eye. And I was just like, Again, I was hooked and I was intrigued and I wanted to know more. And so we met for a coffee afterwards. And that was the beginning of our journey, working together and setting up a business together and me learning how to coach. And needless to say, I did my first triathlon after being coached by him and the Olympic swimmer, and came second to the European champion. So whatever he did or whatever they did worked.
Incredible. I love that combination.
Yeah.
Head and heart, or mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah. And that was several years after I had been told I'd never run again, after my skiing accident that you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
and Amy, actually, I'm going to jump ahead a little here. So Amy recently had a book come out called Ignite Your Inner Spirit.
Yes.
And in that book, she shares the most incredible story of when she ran again after being told she would never run again. So I strongly recommend you check out that book. You can find it on Amazon, and in the links below this show, Ignite Your Inner Spirit. That story is amazing. I'm going to let people get the book.
Yes.
That's all I'm going to say. Totally worth the $5 it'll cost you to read that story. It's incredibly inspiring.
Yeah. Thank you.
So much I could say here, but I'd like to start by asking, what does true abundance mean to you?
Okay, so abundance to me, the kind of abundance I generally talk about, is one in which you find a true sense of inner peace. So that's, it's like no matter how fierce the storm of life is, you step into your own personal power, not a power to control or dominate, but a deep inner power from which you motivate, lead, engage the people around you. And from then you cultivate an inspired purpose. So that, by that I mean a vision in which others find themselves, one that inspires people, uplifts people. And this is what I mean by true abundance. And I honestly believe as well that it's the future of leadership and high performance, because the work to be done, as you and I know, always begins with ourselves. And when I think about and when I help people along the journey that they join me in to do with abundance, for me, it's about generating happiness as a way of being. It's about shining your own light by creating inner peace, no matter how fierce the storm. It's about developing that sense of authentic power, about leading your life authentically with purpose and presence. And challenging and transcending current and cultural mindsets as well. So questioning the status quo and challenging what's being said and not accepting everything that's given to us. It's also about being mindful of all your relations and the way in which you communicate and the impact that has. And one other thing is that it's also about understanding the power of choice. And I remember a long time ago when I first met a shaman I was working with, he used to say to me that choice was the most important word in the English language, because we always have the power to choose rather than to react. We have a power to choose how we respond to things. And when we're given tools with which to choose a different outcome, then that for me is a life that is rich, that is abundant, because you have the tools with which to create a different outcome.
I love that. I love that. The power of choice. We always have a choice how we respond.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like I'm still on that journey, learning that on deeper and deeper levels. Do you think it's possible for everybody to achieve inner peace? Sometimes it can feel like a far off goal and only available to those, without families or those in monasteries. Or what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's quite funny because quite often when I talk about inner peace, people just give me the whites of their eyes. It's to say, oh God, because it does feel like such a big, intangible thing out there in the world rather than something that we can create moment by moment. And one of the things that I do teach is that it is actually something that you have complete control over. And when you really lean into the power of choice, at any given moment, you have the choice to choose between ego, which is always fear-based, and spirit, which is always love-based. And when ego loves to complicate things, and it loves drama, whereas spirit, soul is always really simple. And so when you boil all of your emotions and your reactions and everything down to ego or spirit, fear or love, it's actually a really simple choice. And so when you are in a difficult situation, the kids are screaming, or there's some big upset at work, or there's something going on, if you can take one simple step back from the situation at hand and then take a breath, breathe, because oxygen is always necessary when you're trying to think. And usually when we're in fight or flight, the oxygen goes from our brain to our muscles because your body's getting ready to get out of here. So the first thing we need to do is take a breath. Simple. And then it's to look at, well, am I in ego or am I in spirit? And when you're in fear because your body is reacting, your hands go clammy, you get tense, you get angry, you can sense when you're in fear. And so you make the choice in that moment to take a breath, to move from fear into love, and then you carry on with the situation at hand. And you can create, a different outcome from the one that the ego would have you going down those tracks.
Right. This reminds me of When I first started Buddhist meditation in my late teens, I remember learning about the concept of the gap.
Exactly, the gap, yes.
The gap, and the gap is where the opportunity is. The gap is when you become aware,
exactly.
then you make the choice going forwards.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what you're saying, right, is opening up that gap, and where there is an awareness of what's going on, where you breathe, where you connect, and you make a conscious choice.
Yeah. And often, I mean, I know you're a great journaler as well, but often when people are starting out on this journey and they haven't really journaled before, they haven't really necessarily got the level of self-awareness to do that in the moment, they think about it in hindsight. Journaling is what really, really helps at this point, especially at the beginning of somebody's journey, because it is literally taking the beliefs and the thinking out from your head, which is where most of us keep it, and we never let it out unless we get to a state of rage and anger, and then it erupts out. So journaling is a really great way to start creating that separation, to creating that gap, because you start seeing it on paper rather than holding it within.
I'd love to bring a real life example to this conversation for your perspective.
Sure.
So I requested some business advice from somebody last week, somebody close to me, and they were sharing some things that really triggered me. They were giving a very honest and very blunt critique of my business. And immediately my ego kicked in. I feel the how dare you. I wasn't saying it, but I could feel the how dare you. I could feel that my own shame and unworthiness kicked in, because I knew there was some truth. When we're in the intensity of that moment, my emotions overcame me. And how when we're in that intensity of the moment, is it going back to pausing and breathing? Do you recommend parking it and working with it later in the journal?
I think, if you're in the moment, I think particularly being British as well, but we don't in the moment necessarily feel we can or feel we ought to disrupt the flow or interrupt, or we feel we can't possibly, say, look, I need 5 minutes, let's regroup in 5 minutes. If you actually do that and just say, you can feel something building up, and the other person at the other end can feel something too, because it's all energy, right? So they might not necessarily be able to identify it, but they can usually pick up on things. And so as you are starting to create a new level of self-awareness, and you started journaling and you're getting it out of your head and onto paper, if you find yourself in such a situation, you have all the right, and even you have the responsibility to yourself and to the other people in that moment to say, great, thank you very much. I've listened to you, I've heard you, etc. And I just need a 5-minute break. Can we regroup in 5 minutes? And so in those 5 minutes, you then do the work on yourself. You then let out whatever needs to come out. You journal, you get it out. And then you come back to the conversation with a clear head.
I love that. So simple. And so easy to remember that in the moment as well.
And it is your responsibility, and it's your duty to that conversation and to the outcome of that conversation, to take that time to pause and breathe and do whatever you need to do in those 5 minutes, and then come back grounded.
And you talked about responding from the place of ego, which is fear-based, and the place of spirit, which is love-based. How in that moment do we distinguish? I think in relationships, there can be a conflict sometimes between honesty and saying, well, I want to be honest with you, but also sensitivity and compassion and kindness. How do we know when we're coming from a place of ego versus spirit?
Well, the clearest telltale sign is if you're nervous, if you're sweating, if you're going red in the face, whatever your reaction is to being in a state of fear, your bodily reaction, you know it because you're feeling it. And generally speaking, when you're in fear, you shrink. You sort of go in physically, you go in on yourself, your shoulders hunch over, you get smaller. Whereas if you're in a state of being in spirit, then you are expansive. and you're relaxed. And even though you may be facing a challenging conversation, you're relaxed about having a challenging conversation.
Yeah, I love that. So one's contracting and one's expanding.
Yeah. And so a few of the things that I teach people is how to have conversations with your heart at peace. And there's, a step-by-step process to do that. And my shamanic teacher, Hawk, he used this process in the 1980s when he was called in to help the peace negotiations in Ireland, in Northern Ireland. And of course, he didn't say what he was doing at the time, and he didn't say where the process came from. And it didn't come, he didn't say that it came from some Native American wisdom teachings, because he probably would have been thrown out. But he used the system and helped to create the peace negotiations in the 1980s. So it's really, really powerful. And it's essentially about taking one thing and one thing very specifically that you want to talk about. So it's not bringing a whole barrage of stuff that you're annoyed about or irritated about. You talk about one particular thing. And you bring that to the table, and you, within 30 to 60 seconds, explain what you want to talk about. And then you explain why it's important for you. Then you explain how it makes you feel. And these are all within 30 to 60 second segments. And then you talk about your part in the issue, so your responsibility in the issue, because it takes two to tango. So it's not just about pointing the blame at someone else. You also talk about how you're responsible. And then you invite the other person to do the same. You go through the same step process, and then you come to an agreement at the end, and then you put a date in the diary as a by when you're both going to tune back in and see how you're both progressing in this new agreement you've made going forwards. And the 30-second to 60-second piece is really important, because people generally tend to shut off when you speak for much longer than that, especially when it's a challenging conversation, because they go into their ego, they go into a fear state, because they're waiting to respond. They're not actually listening to what's going on.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Because when we're charged up and when we feel threatened or under attack, we can rant.
Yes. And you're not actually listening to what's being said. You're preparing your armory to fire back. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, preparing your defense. I can feel like guns being pulled back, ready to fire.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
I'd love to ask you, when have you felt most abundant in your life?
Oh gosh, when have I felt most abundant? I think the two different moments actually come to mind. One is when I was working in Panama, and we were working with top level teams and executives and the president and all sorts. And that really was expansive, and I was learning on the job, and it was constant learning, constant deep diving, constant working on myself to be able to work on other people at higher levels. So that was then. And right now is also one of those other moments. And before coming onto this interview, I was thinking about Money Beautifully, which I did 3 times. And I was thinking about the beliefs that I had to overcome going through that process and where I've come to now. And at the moment, one of the projects I'm working on is a big platform to help students and apprentices develop their character. And my role in this particular piece of work is at a very senior level within that company. And so I'm being challenged day in, day out to rise and grow and develop. And as that's happening, I'm also having to ground myself daily into a feeling of abundance, as opposed to a feeling of I'm not there yet and I'm not good enough. And So I'm constantly constantly grounding myself into abundance and the teachings that I've been taught by Hawk, the stuff I've learned from you as well, and leaning into what's possible and leaning into my own work and my own teachings of inner peace. And it feels like quite a sort of oscillating experience, but I'm catching myself whenever I feel like if I'm in a meeting and I have to speak up about something in particular, and I don't necessarily know enough of the technicalities of it, I'm constantly reminding myself that I am there for a reason, that I do know exactly what I'm doing within the realm that my scope, and that I have a team around me who are supporting me in that role. And so I feel like I'm sort of teetering on the edge all the time because I'm growing and expanding every single day. And I've actually learned to lean into that and feel abundant within that. And that's been one of my latest epiphanies.
Amazing. That's so beautiful to hear.
Yeah.
To be witness to that process.
Yeah.
Constantly happening.
Yeah.
There's always an opportunity to get pulled out of that alignment.
Yeah.
Bring yourself back into abundance. And that, like peace, it's a choice.
Yeah, it is. And it's exactly choice. And as we were saying just before we came on as well, I'm constantly looking for signs as well. And lately the numbers have just been going crazy. I keep seeing all these, 22, 22 and 16, 16 and all these numbers, which are, confirmations for me, and also white feathers, which I haven't seen for a while. But as you know, when my mum passed away, I asked for signs and I asked for white feathers. And it's more sporadic now, but when I ask for one, I usually get one, and that's always a confirmation that I'm on the right path. So, yeah.
I love that. I'm also a big fan of numbers. It's constantly 22.2 degrees in my house, according to my cheap digital thermometer. And I went out the other day, and there was a white feather on my doormat.
Oh, brilliant!
It was very magical.
Yeah.
So. You touched already on some of the work that you've done to shift your own money story. And I should just say, for those of you that are new to me and my work, Money Beautifully is my flagship online program for clearing your money blocks and writing a new money story. And I'll include a link to the waitlist page when we next open in the show notes. But it is a journey to write a new money story. And I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the programming or beliefs that you've shifted along your journey.
Absolutely. Gosh. I remember hearing quite a bit as a kid, money doesn't grow on trees.
Oh, that's such a British
isn't it? Just
it's in the curriculum.
That was quite a big one. It takes a lot of money to make money. That was another one I discovered. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That was another one I discovered. Also, it's selfish to want a lot of money.
Yes.
More money, more problems.
More money, more problems.
I'm just not good with money. That was another one. Money's not that important. It's only money, that sort of thing. The classic spiritual one, when you get into this world, that it's not spiritual to charge for money, charge for your services. Those were the sort of key ones that came to me as I was thinking about that, about those beliefs.
Yeah. And so what happened as you started shifting these beliefs along your journey?
Yeah. What I started finding was that I had more grace and ease around money. I had shame around earning money or not, charging my worth, that sort of thing, disappeared. And I just felt, I started taking more charge of my money. I started taking more interest in my money and what I was spending and where I was saving, and actually spending money on investing in me, so doing more courses, And also spending money on things that I actually enjoy. That was a big one for me because I sort of never allowed myself to spend money on things that I enjoyed. And, I'd always shop in charity shops and, things like that. And I'd be really glad, I'd be really sort of, this is something I got from my mum, but where we grew up in Suffolk, there must have been some woman who was about the same size as my mum and I, and she obviously had lots of designer clothes and designer suits and things like that she wore once or twice and then took to the charity shop, because we'd always find the most amazing things for next to nothing.
Brilliant manifestors.
I know, it was amazing. I remember she found me a Versace suit that when I was 18, and I went off to my first job interview in it, and felt $1 million, but it was always that sort of cheekiness of it would only cost us about £10.
I love that.
But it took me quite a lot to step into actually paying for something that I wanted and valued, and not getting this sort of undercut price for, and feeling worthy in doing that, and feeling like I could do that and that I was allowed to do that. That was actually a really big shift for me.
Yeah, really interesting. So there were several threads there. We've got the piece around being much more conscious around money.
Yes.
More intimate with it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And then you said more grace and ease.
Yeah.
So that's like an emotional shift in your relationship. And then you said releasing the shame.
Yes.
Of charging. Yeah, I love that. So self-worth.
Yeah.
And then we had the piece around joy, which I love.
Yeah.
Spending money on things that bring you joy, and also up-leveling your investment in yourself. Yeah.
All really, really important pieces, and all parts of the puzzle.
Yeah. I'm curious. You've come a long way on this journey. What advice would you have for someone who is stuck in lack and scarcity and feels like there's just never enough, or they're just not enough to have what they want?
Firstly, I'd start again by journaling, actually, and getting familiar with the stuff that you're telling yourself about money. Because only when you create that gap, as we were talking about earlier, it's only when you create that gap that you can start to see where your limiting beliefs are within your relationship to money, and to understand that we do actually have a relationship with money. It's not just some thing out there. We actually have a relationship, and that most people's relationship with money is pretty distorted from beliefs that we've picked up through generations, family things, cultural things to do with money. So there's a lot to unpack there. That would be my first step, is just start becoming aware of what your beliefs are around money. But then I would also, and it's not supposed to be a plug for Money Beautifully, but I'd actually sign up to Money Beautifully, because you package it so brilliant, and the journey is fantastic. And that was really the Kickstarter for me in taking much more responsibility around my money and my relationship with money, and how I interact with it.
Thank you for sharing that. And
my pleasure.
I really appreciate you sharing how powerful the journey was for you.
Absolutely.
I'm curious. We have already sort of dovetailed, swam. I feel like it's a dolphin swimming between peace and abundance. Can you talk more about the connection between inner peace and abundance?
Yes. So it's like a lot of people say, well, what's inner peace got to do with anything? And my answer to that is, well, everything. And for me, there's nothing more exciting than inner peace. I used to think peace was boring, and that I'd have to sit on a hilltop somewhere and chant many ohms before I could get there. And that I didn't have time for that, because I'm always so busy. Nor, being an athletic sort, did I want to sit still for that long, until I found it in a fleeting moment, and realized in that moment that there is actually nowhere to get to but to be right here, right now, in the present moment, present to life in all its magnificence. And right there lies inner peace, and that's where it's accessible to all.
Mm.
And when you get present to that, when you're able to be in the present moment and you're able to appreciate the present moment, and you started to create that gap so that you have more self-awareness about your relationship with abundance. For me, inner peace is the foundation of that, of relationship. And so when you talk about connection between inner peace and abundance, it's the foundation for me. Because once you have a foundation of inner peace, what you then build on top of that is infinitely more powerful, infinitely more abundant. It really, for me, that is really the go-to piece of work, is the ability to create inner peace in any given moment. And I did write an ode to peace, which I'd love to read out.
Yeah, I would love
if we have time. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. So peace is a thrilling place where there is joy in being and in presence. Peace is a choice you make moment by moment. Peace is complete freedom to meet life as it appears, not as you think it appears. Peace is an opportunity to not take anything personally, because it isn't. Peace opens up incredible possibility and encourages breakthroughs. Peace is the very seedling of dynamic activity, spontaneity, and creativity. Peace cultivates clarity, focus, and high performance. Peace is exciting, joyful, and dynamic. It speeds everything up. Peace provides access to personal power, to a dynamic purpose and vision. Peace engages and inspires, connects and collaborates. Peace communicates compassionately and powerfully. Peace allows for win-win negotiations. Peace is knowing that we are all connected. Peace is expansive. Globally, we thrive in peace.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I think there's such power, in words. There's such energy in words. So thank you for sharing your message in such a beautiful way.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I know you're going to want to pause and re-listen to that part. So God bless that this is a podcast and it's captured for posterity.
Yeah.
From that place, how can we maintain inner peace during the pandemic? We are recording this in February 2021. Much of Europe is in extreme lockdown. How do we maintain inner peace at this time when we may disagree with the decisions of those in positions of power, like the government and politicians? So it's not just peace within our close relationships, but this is something that seems on the surface out of our control.
Yeah. Great question. And whilst everything out there, government decisions and vaccine mandates and all the rest of it, seems out of our control, the only thing that we can really control is our inner world. And when you point your finger at somebody or something, the government, let's say, you've actually got 3 fingers pointing back at you. If you imagine holding your fingers out, your forefinger out, your other 3 fingers, not your thumb, but your other 3 fingers come pointing back at you. And so the work to be done is always on ourselves. Always. And if you're struggling under lockdown, if you're not in agreement with what's going on out there in the world, then go within first. Use some of the tools you've learned today. I have another I can share with you in just a moment. And create a sense of inner peace in your own inner being first. Then share that with your immediate circle. Teach them how to create inner peace as well. The Dalai Lama said, if every 8-year-old child were taught to meditate, we'd have world peace in 1 generation. That's how easy it is. It's not that simple to operationalize, but that's how easy it is.
Yeah.
And so we are all responsible for our own inner peace. And as we create inner peace within ourselves as a daily practice, other people around us will start noticing. They'll start thinking, gosh, what has Polly done today? How is she so happy in amidst the pandemic and everything else that's going on? And that we can control. That is our duty. That is our responsibility.
I love that. I love that. I could talk to you all day. All day. Well, we've been talking for over 5 years now.
Yes.
We never run out of things to talk about whenever we connect. We obviously have been apart now for a while. Unfortunately, our inaugural trip to Ibiza didn't happen this year.
No.
So I would love to hear more about what you're working on at the moment. How are you taking your message out to the world?
Thank you. Well, as you mentioned, there was a book that was published late last year called Ignite Your Inner Spirit. And I've got another one coming up called Ignite Possibilities, which will be published in April. And then I'm also working on a big project to help students and apprentices develop their character, things such as resilience, courage, adaptability, etc. And that's all about who they're being in the world, not just what they're doing and their technical skills, but actually how they show up in a world that is increasingly changing at an ever faster rate. As the speeding up of technology speeds up, then we as humans have to learn to be resilient, have to learn to be adaptable and be courageous. And then on a coaching and a healing level, I continue to work one-on-one with people. I'm not doing any group work at the moment, just one-on-one sessions. And obviously I'm available to speak now. Part of my plan was to be engaged in more public speaking around peace this year. And that's obviously got to happen on Zoom interviews as opposed to in person. Mm-hmm. But one of the messages that I shared a couple of years ago, I was speaking at the inaugural Cancer Patient Symposium in London. And this was organized by a friend of mine who has cancer. And he was given, a few months to live several years ago. And so he decided to organize this because he's been on a very, very interesting journey through his cancer journey. And he's a researcher and a documentary maker by trade. So he's always asking really, really fascinating, deep questions of all of the doctors he comes into contact with, whether they're NHS doctors or whether they are alternative. And so I prepared this whole talk, and I was the last speaker to speak that day. And there was a room full of cancer patients who'd been essentially spoken at all day because he had such eminent speakers there. You could see all these cancer patients scribbling all these notes down, left, right, center of what this one said and what that one said, and this new treatment and that new treatment, da-da-da-da-da-da. And as I was getting up on stage, my friend said, "Sorry, Amy, you don't have an hour. We've only got 30 minutes. We've run out of time." So I thought, oh gosh, how do I squeeze an hour into 30 minutes? And so for the first couple of minutes, I started sort of going through my slides and my normal presentation that I'd prepared. And then I just looked at the audience and thought, they're in overload now. They can't take on any more information. They're already in a state of fear by the fact that they have cancer. So what can I do? So I put down my clicker for my PowerPoint and I put my notes to one side and I just decided to speak from the heart. I had no idea what I was going to share. But what came out was my journey with cancer. So at the time, my mum had cancer and I had left Panama when one day I was given notice that she had collapsed and was given 48 hours to live. And you can imagine that flight across the Atlantic going home that day from Panama to London. So I arrived 24 hours later and got by her side in the hospital and basically told her I wasn't going anywhere, thinking that she'd be gone in 24 hours. And she ended up living another 2.5 years, which was incredible. She defied all the doctors left, right, and center. And I decided in that moment not to go back to Panama, not to keep building the business. So I started building out there with Hawk, but to take care of my mum and spend every day by her side, no matter what it took. And in that process, I'd already been called the Peace Whisperer by my clients in Panama. And what that did for me, was I was able to connect with my mum on a much deeper level, which I hadn't done for a long time because I'd lived overseas for so long and I'd been at boarding school and away at university. So I hadn't really lived with my mum since I was about 13. And it gave me the opportunity to really live what I was teaching on a whole other level. I didn't know what I was showing up to every single morning. So some mornings mum would be absolutely fine. Other mornings she would be in a terrible state. And I knew that I had to get my heart right. I had to put myself in a state of inner peace before I opened the door to her room every single morning, because I didn't want to be putting my stuff, my anxiety, etc., onto her when she already had enough going on. So that was my responsibility, and that was my duty that I ensured that I did every single morning, was create a space of inner peace in my heart so that I could be of service to her. And when I started talking about this journey at the Cancer Patient Symposium, I also talked about the emotions behind cancer, which are anger and bitterness. And when I shared those two emotions with this room full of cancer patients, it was almost like there was just a sigh of relief in the room and tears, because suddenly I was allowing them permission, I was giving them permission to feel those feelings that are so ugly usually in us, anger and bitterness. And literally, there was barely a dry eye in the house afterwards, and I had quite a few of them come up to me saying how powerful that was. And then I took them through a theta healing meditation to help clear some of that energy. And yeah, it was fantastic. And what I learned from that was, I've just being able to channel and being able to feel the audience in the room and respond to that rather than be scripted. That was a huge lesson for me as a speaker, because I really learned to trust the wisdom I have within that I don't always recognize. And I know you call me your wise owl. And sometimes I don't always recognize that wisdom. But if I relax into it and trust that it will come through, then it usually does. And I know in that moment that the universe has my back and that I'm supported and guided, and that the most effective work happens in those moments.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So you can find out more about Amy on her website, Amy Hackett Jones, on Instagram, Amy Hackett Jones.
Yep.
I'll put all the other links in the show notes. Amy, thank you so much for bringing your grace, your wisdom, your deep, grounded sense of peace to this conversation. And thank you for opening up the possibility that peace is available to everyone here. And that abundance and deep peace is something that we can all access in any given moment. It's a possibility for all of us.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you continue to share your incredible gifts with the world.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So much love. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Feminine Millionaire. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure that you subscribe so you automatically get the new episodes every week. And I would love it if you left me a review. This would mean so much to me, and I will send everyone that writes a review a copy of my Manifest Your Biggest Month Ever meditation, not available publicly. Just send a screenshot of your review to support@pollyalexander.com and my team will get it out to you. I also invite all of you to sign up for my free gift, a success meditation, which contains powerful energy work and helps you rewrite your limiting beliefs around money and success on a deep subconscious level. Go to pollyalexander.com/success-meditation or click on the link below this episode. My favourite place to hang out on social media is Instagram, so that's where you'll find me online. Thank you so much for being here. I send you all so much love and I look forward to seeing you here again next week.